Now Zelensky has completely lost it and attacked the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. After an attack with combat drones, one of the cooling towers caught fire, and that could lead to really severe chain reactions. And that's not all. Next on Zelensky's list is the nuclear power plant in Kursk. Let's take a look at these explosive developments. Here we go. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm really at a loss for words. Indeed, Zelensky has seriously attacked the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant with combat drones and set it on fire. The Bild newspaper wrote a few hours ago about a fire at the cooling tower of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The governor of the region, appointed by Moscow, Yevgeny Belitsky, stated that there had been a Ukrainian attack on the area around the plant earlier, as reported by the state agency TASS. However, there is no danger as all units of the nuclear power plant have been shut down. The radiation levels are within the normal range. Yevgeny Belitsky says on the online service Telegram that as a result of shelling by Ukrainian forces in the city of Enerhodar, a fire broke out in a cooling system. Russian authorities spoke of significant damage to the infrastructure. According to the Russian account, the fire was caused by a combat drone. Wow, I'm really speechless. The Russians say that the nuclear power plant is indeed shut down and the radiation levels are actually within the standard range, but that could change at any moment, because the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was decommissioned shortly after the Russians took over in 2022. But it is still extremely dangerous because even a deactivated nuclear power plant, which is a significant risk, needs to be cooled for at least 5 more years and requires constant monitoring to prevent the fuel rods from overheating and melting to ensure safety, because this molten mass could then potentially eat through the reactor's containment and escape into the outside world. And if now, as mentioned, one of the important cooling towers is burning and the fire possibly even spreads to the other cooling towers, then we could really experience a super meltdown. I mean, what was Zelensky thinking with this attack? Because 2 years ago, the Russians also attacked and took over the nuclear power plant. But at least the Russians were not dumb enough to shoot at the cooling towers with combat drones. So by now it seems that Zelensky is really backed into a corner so much that he doesn't care about anything anymore. 2001. And he even sets a nuclear power plant on fire. But hey, of course this is all just nasty Putin propaganda, and the Russians set the fire at the nuclear power plant themselves. The Bild newspaper further wrote that Ukraine President Zelensky shared a video on Twitter showing the burning cooling tower. Zelensky, however, indeed claims that the Russians started the fire there. Zelensky says radiation levels are within normal range. However, President points out that Russia is blackmailing the entire world with the nuclear power plant. Zelensky says that as long as the Russians maintain control over the nuclear power plant, the situation is not normal and cannot be. Since the first day of taking control, Russia has only used the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to blackmail Ukraine, all of Europe, and the world. Okay, so the Russians took over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant more than 2 years ago. And now, of all times, they set a fire there themselves. Yeah, right. Whoever believes that will believe anything. Zelensky is really trying everything, but really everything, to blame the Russians. He said they were responsible for Nord Stream. He said the rocket strikes on Poland came from the Russians, the dam explosion, attacks on the Crimean bridge, all are the Russians. Even though the Russians would have no advantage from it. Well, at least in the case of the attack on the Crimean bridge and the missile strikes in Poland, indeed clarification has now been provided, and it was indeed proven that it was not actually the Russians, but even the Ukrainians. And here with the fire at the nuclear power plant, I also definitely consider Zelensky to be absolutely the cause. But do you know what's really unbelievable? Zelensky is actually saying that Putin is indeed blackmailing the whole world with this nuclear power plant. And I really have to ask myself, sorry, but who is actually really blackmailing whom here? Zelensky has indeed recently shut down the Druzhba pipeline in the last few days. So, the last gas pipeline, which was constructed in the year 2000 that brought gas to Eastern and Southern Europe in the region, Zelensky indeed closed the Druzhba pipeline, even though the EU had categorically prohibited him to do so, and he had even signed agreements to keep the gas flowing. So who is blackmailing whom with energy here? And the shocking thing is, apparently Zelensky has now targeted the next nuclear power plant, specifically the one in the Kursk region, where he is currently launching massive attacks against Russia, apparently the target of this counterattack. In Kursk is the nuclear power plant. In the end, Bild writes that in light of the Ukrainian advance into the Russian territory of Kursk, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, warns of possible dangers to the nuclear power plant there. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi called on both sides to adhere to the important rules for nuclear safety in conflict zones. Regarding the nuclear power plant in the Kursk region, Grossi, head of the Atomic Energy Agency, reminded Russia and Ukraine of the fundamental importance of safety for nuclear facilities in crisis areas. And he recalls the additional rules that were established for the Russian-occupied nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia, in southern Ukraine, which would also be applicable in this case. It does not matter. If it is a nuclear power plant, so in the last few days, there has been a lot of speculation about what Zelensky intends to do with this suicide mission in the Kursk region. And now the cat is out of the bag. He aims to control or shut down the nuclear power plant in Kursk, because in the event of an attack, Russia would have to immediately shut down this nuclear power plant to prevent a major disaster. And apparently Zelensky now wants to respond with the same means as Putin and destroy the opponent's infrastructure. And from a tactical perspective, this attack on the nuclear power plant in Kursk is quite understandable. But from a human perspective, this step is absolutely insane, because how far have we come? When both warring parties in this conflict are now seriously attacking each other's nuclear power plants and risking a nuclear catastrophe, at least Putin is definitely smart enough not to attack the extremely important and vital cooling towers with combat drones. I don't even really want to look at what's happening there and what significant and dramatic impacts these attacks could have. Absolutely. What do you think about these dangerous attacks on the nuclear power plants? Feel free to write your opinion in the comments below the video.